Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. We begin in the central London Hatching and Conditioning Centre, where the Director of Hatchery and Conditioning and his assistant Henry Foster is giving a group tour to students. Here babies are now engineered in tubes instead of born, and they are conditioned into 5 castes: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and Epsilon. The Alphas and Betas are the smartest and remain intact, but the Deltas, Gammas, and Epsilons each have 100 brothers and sisters, all created from the same egg. They are created through the Volkanovsky process, and they each are extremely unintelligent. The tour shifts over to an area where babies are being conditioned to like their jobs in the future. The lower castes are experiencing shocks and loud sounds whenever they get close to books and flowers, to condition them to stay away from these things that only alphas and betas are allowed to have. Next, the tour shifts over to a garden where babies are engaging in sexual play with each other, and this is where the group meets Mustafa Mond, one of the most powerful people in the world. This is mainly an introduction to this character, but he explains the world, why it is engineered this way, and how it was before this was like. Now we are introduced to Bernard Marx, who is an alpha male, although he is a bit short for his caste. He is attracted to a girl named Lenina, who is a basic beta girl, and who he likes, although he thinks she is too much like everyone else. We are also introduced to Soma, a drug that makes you feel stoned and makes you happy all the time. This is a regulated drug from the government, and everyone takes it to feel happy. Bernard then goes over to his friend Helmholtz Watson's house, where he and him bond in being different. Although Bernard is different from the rest of society in being shorter than the rest of the alpha males, Helmholtz can think for himself more than other people, so he feels that society is different from him. Bernard proceeds to go to a church service called Solitary Service, where they praise Ford, the prophet of their time. They take Soma and then have an orgy at this church reception. After that, Bernard feels unsatisfied and he wants to go to a reservation, which is an uncivilized place for humans, and asks the Director of Hatcheries and Conditioning for permission to go there. Enraged by this idea, the director tells Bernard a story of when he went to the reservation. He went with a lady, and while he was on the trip, she fell down somewhere and he could never find her. This is a warning from the director to basically not go, but Bernard goes anyway and takes Lenina on with him. Right as Bernard and Lenina arrive, they witness a ritual where a young boy is whipped repeatedly. After that, they meet a boy at the reservation, and unlike the other red-skinned, black-haired people, he is blonde and white, and can speak English as well. John proceeded to tell a story of his childhood to Bernard and Lenina. His mother, Linda, also came from civilization and was left behind by her husband. She slept with many of the tribe's women's husbands and got whipped by them in revenge. She slept particularly often with a man named Popeye, who John disliked, although he gave John a book of all of Shakespeare's works, which Linda also taught him how to read. Bernard was quite interested from the story and decided to take John and Linda back to the brave new world. Upon returning to London, Bernard is confronted by the director and is being exiled by him. Bernard, realizing that Linda's story and the director's story lines up, he calls in Linda, and Linda recognizes the director as her husband and tells the director that John is his son. Ideas of fatherhood and families are pornographic at this time, and the director takes back the exile on Bernard. John and Lenina go on a date. They go to a feelie, and this is like a movie that stimulates all five senses. After the feelie, John and Lenina go back to Lenina's apartment, and Lenina wants to have sex with him. John, however, is not in the mood and leaves. Lenina is confused about why John won't sleep with her, as most people would, so she strips in front of him, and he gets extremely angry at this and calls her a whore, yells at her, and throws stuff at her until he gets a call from a hospital nearby stating that Linda, his mom, has been on an overdose of soma and is in a coma. John visits the hospital where Linda is at, and she dies right in front of his eyes. He runs out of the hospital, but encountering a group of deltas getting their rations of soma. Angered by Linda's death, he throws the soma out of a window, yelling them to be free, and then they start to fight him, causing a riot. Helmholtz, now John's friend, starts to fight them too, but Bernard stands in the corner, afraid to get caught. They all get arrested for this, including Bernard. Mustafa Mond has a meeting with them, and eventually sentences Bernard and Helmholtz to separate islands for exile. John, however, is sentenced to live alone in a lighthouse. After Bernard and Helmholtz are sent away, Mustafa Mond and John continue a discussion. At this part, they discuss why the world has to be engineered this way, and why can't people just be free and happy. Mond and John continue this debate and basically explore the themes of this novel. John lives in solitude, and he whips himself there to punish himself for being so happy living in solitude, causing a huge ruckus of reporters and people wanting to know why he does this to himself. When the reporters get up in all his business, he accidentally takes some soma and participates in a large orgy. He wakes up the next day extremely sad about his actions and then hangs himself.